Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Chevron Home Care. Very glad to be joining you here today. Thank you for joining us here on Bayou Time. It's important for us to always bring you breaking and news information. We're always glad to partner with law enforcement to be able to do that as we welcome into the program Captain Brennan Matherne with Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office. Hi, Brennan. How are you today?
Hey, doing well, Keith. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we've got an update on the Saturday shooting. If you wouldn't mind kind of giving us a little bit of an update about that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So today actually yesterday we made an arrest of an individual that was responsible for a shooting that we had on Saturday evening. It occurred right around the intersection of LA 308 and Highway 182 in Raceland.
Mm-hmm.
And that shooting took place in the early morning hours of Saturday around 2 a.m. Ultimately, it was just a graze wound for the victim who was treated at a local hospital and released. But the suspect, that as detectives came to learn, was 21-year-old Tyron Odomah. And it took a couple of days of investigation and working with Odomah is from the Houma area, so our investigators here in Lafourche worked with the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office diligently over the first couple of days of this investigation, and ultimately they were able to locate Odomah driving into St. Mary Parish. When they found that, they contacted authorities in St. Mary Parish, and deputies on patrol conducted a traffic stop. Our investigators, along with investigators from the Terrebonne Sheriff's Office, also went to that traffic stop to continue that investigation. Odomah was taken into custody. We also found drugs and a firearm and cash in his vehicle, presumed to be from drug sales. So ultimately, all of that was confiscated as part of the investigation. And so he faces, because that all happened in St. Mary Parish, he faces several charges there, including gun possession, drug, possession of a stolen firearm, drug possession, and all of that. But here in Lafourche, he faces charges of attempted second-degree murder, as well as possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And his bail, once he does get transferred over here, will be well over $1 million.
Well, that's always good to know to see that the diligence of your team. And this is what happens when we have these parishes so close together. We have an incident that takes place in Lafourche. We know that the person lives, the identified person lives in Houma, and we have to kind of track them as they kind of move to St. Mary. It's wonderful to be able to see law enforcement working so well together. It's something that we brag about all the time. You and I talk about it. But here we are so very glad that you can work so well and so easily with groups from different parishes.
It really is a great asset. Back when we changed all of our computing systems to kind of update for the future, and we had all of our area law enforcement agencies do that. Now Terrebonne Parish, in Lafourche Parish, now Terrebonne Parish is on board, and it really makes for a seamless, flow of information. And the crazy part to us is that this isn't practiced anywhere else. It's rare that law enforcement agencies, even neighboring or interjurisdictional law enforcement agencies, would share information the flow of information so easily. But it just makes things so much easier. This morning, got on the phone with my fellow PIOs, David Spencer in St. Mary Parish and Blake Tabor here in Terrebonne Parish there. And, again, that flow of information from working with those guys over the last few years was fairly easy. We put all of our heads together and we're able to churn out this news release for you guys. And again, it just shows at all levels how that share and flow of information helps. But, our investigators here in Lafourche always work well with neighboring law enforcement agencies. Terrebonne and St. Mary is just an example of that. And thanks to those Sheriff Smith and Sheriff Saunier for allowing those partnerships to take place along with Sheriff Weber here in Lafourche Parish.
Yeah, and again, we get somebody who's pretty dangerous off the streets, where we think, not too sure about what really exactly happened with this shooting. Fortunately, the victim was not injured in a grave or dangerous way, that they was just nicked. But we see all these other charges with illegal possession of a stolen firearm, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession of a firearm in the presence of a controlled dangerous substance, possession with intent to distribute heroin, transactions involving drug proceeds, a possession of drug paraphernalia. I mean, all of these things that this gentleman is now being brought up on, and it's because of the great work of all three different sheriff's offices that we were able to kind of do that. And these charges that he'll be facing in St. Mary, the charges he'll be facing in Lafourche, and then again, a bond over $1 million when that comes out, it will be very nice to be able to see, to keep that person off of the streets of all three parishes.
And look, I mean, this isn't a random act of violence. We're still in the process of investigation, but it's not as though that we had a public safety issue with this guy on the streets. I mean, ultimately, he was involved in a shooting, or at least allegedly involved in a shooting. But like, most of the crimes that occur in this area, it wasn't random. We believe there was motive behind it. And so obviously now it's part of that investigation to help prove that through the prosecution with the district attorney's office as well. But again, like you said, despite that, I mean, just the amount of drugs, the money. So obviously someone involved in that drug game, as well as someone who, allegedly pulled the trigger in this situation. You're right. Absolutely. Great to work with all those agencies to get someone like that off the street.
Well, Captain, we thank you so very much always for your time, and we appreciate that. So thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it.
All right, very good. And again, they've been able to arrest Tyrone Odemont, 21, arrested in St. Mary Parish on all those charges that we mentioned earlier. And we thank Captain Brennan and all of law enforcement for helping us with that. All right, we're going to take a break right here on Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more local programming when we return.